So we'll go through announcements and business and where the club is and some of what WASBA is working on right now. And get ready if you have something you'd like to share. A lot of times you have pictures of your hives. And everybody here enjoys pictures of your hives. This is better than coming back from an expensive vacation. You want to show the pictures and nobody wants to see them. We all want to see pictures of bees and hives. And we love talking bees. And all our friends and relations are getting really tired of us talking bees. So we get together once a month so we can talk bees. Oh, and on the newsletter, I hope you noticed, I don't think Tony and Michael probably aren't here yet. They got their journeyman. The reason their pictures are on the newsletter is they took the academic, which works out great. People taking the academic with SnoKing, they went back to their own bee clubs and started doing all the service, teaching, workshops, mentoring. They're both super active. And I don't know if they both belong to East Jefferson Bees and West Sound, but I think at least Tony belongs to East Jefferson and Michael belongs to West Sound, but I think they get together and work a lot. And they have club apiaries over there. These are pretty active bee clubs. They're worth checking out. East Jefferson Bees has two websites, ejbees.com and ejbees.org. And West Sound, I don't remember if they have a super web presence, but I think you'll find them too, West Sound Beekeepers. And this is just wonderful that they got through. So get your screen sharing ready. Put anything you want in the chat, introduce yourselves, figure out who's close to you, how long you've been having bees, and I will digest it, put it on the Facebook post. If you don't do Facebook, ask me and I will get it this weekend probably. And in a typed up form, I can put it in the email to you. I've got announcements from WASBA. WASBA got a new president about a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And so some of its emphasis and where it's heading has changed a little bit. And the board, a lot of new members on the board. And then SnoKing is kind of going along, and we've sort of reached a point that I want to talk to people about where we're going. The website has some new stuff on it, the calendar. There's now a chance for you to look and see, when you manage to find calendar, what we are doing which month, which day of which month. Newsletters, past newsletters are finally on there. On the home page, it says the current newsletter. You can click on that, and then it has past newsletters. You might need something that is on a past newsletter. So I put those on there. The new package supplier list, that's on there too. You click and you go to the 2023 nuke package supplier. It's 9 pages in alphabetical order. So until you get to, I think it's Woodlawn Bees, you haven't gotten through the whole list. And there's probably somebody close to you that you might be able to get bees or maybe a queen from later in the season. I think we need to update this with a queen list after the big nuke package delivery distribution period is over. And socials. We have social activities planned. They're on hold until May. The church that hosts us is actually celebrating Lent, and then they celebrate Easter. So definitely May, I would say late May, even possibly. Our hive sides are our hands-on classes, and they are in 3 different locations. We're most active at the Maltby, but Ron, who's here tonight, is doing first and third Saturdays out at the Granite Falls location. So this is a good time to hook up with him. If you're a journeyman and you'd like to help and get service hours helping, talk to Ron if you're out that way. I'm the Maltby one, and then Jessica and I are doing the Sultan one. So you talk to us. If you're a journeyman and wants to help other people get into a hive and do it in a third-party setting, that can be kind of a nice way to start. Or maybe you want to do mentoring, and that's also a good way to meet potential mentees and to meet potential mentors and hook up. The ideal is that we get 6 to 10 people, and sometimes, especially when the weather is good, the ideal works out. I still haven't had a hive side. I need to publish it. We're already scheduled for 2 April nuke and package nuke installations. I think both of them are nuke. If you look on the calendar on the website, maybe the other day, if we're not doing a nuke installation, I think it's the 15th. Maybe we should do the OAV that day. Ron, why don't you think about if you want to do, it's too cold to open a hive. So what we do is we do oxalic acid vaporization. If our winter equipment is still on because it's not warming, we talk about that. Actually, you're waiting for bees to arrive, Ron. So I guess it's going to be me until then. So maybe April 15th would be the perfect date. I have to think about whether the first looks, it's warming, darn it, it's warming. I almost want to say the first, but it gets really cold. And if you're standing out and it's not warm, it's not high 50s, you get too cold to stand very long and talk bees, even though we love talking bees. Nuke installations, we can do the basics and people can either stay and talk or leave. And we have 2 people hosting. That's why those 2, one of them says Tacoma area, and I don't know if I gave the other area, but the other area I think is Woodinville. And I've agreed tentatively, the bees get here on time. We will be installing those 2 Saturdays at those 2 locations. You'll have to contact me because I don't want to put anyone's address and personal information on the website. I'd rather you called for that. And Ron is going to start the Saturdays, the first and third Sundays. But I don't know, Ron, you can say in the chat whether you're going to definitely do that in May or you're going to need a little bit more time. But for me, Saturdays for sure. I put them on the calendar. Although they are limited until then, May should finally be warm enough, we hope, that we can open up an overwintered hive, which is going to be 2 or 3 times the size of the nukes that people are getting. So that lets somebody who's already gotten a nuke in a package and they're feeling, I got my bees in the hive. Now they can come see what the bees are supposed to look like in a while. Some people, when they get a nuke or a package, they think, 10,000 bees. Okay, I can handle this. And then they find out it's supposed to go to 50,000. They're supposed to grow. You're supposed to end up with more bees. And it's very helpful to actually see that. We can go through a lot of things about why are the hives facing this way? Why are the hives at the bottom of the hill or the top of the hill? We have all the tools at our apiaries. We can talk about accessories. The hive tool, the actual tool people use for their basic tool for manipulating the frames and the boxes, and personal protective equipment. Everybody has favorites, but it's a good idea to know something about that. The Queen Project. I'm going to need to send out a newsletter in the next couple of weeks with the actual timeline for the Queen Project. And I overwintered some small queens in what's called double nuclei. And it was very experimental. And the majority still surviving. That's good news. Was not the winter to really get experimental about how you overwinter bees. The big hives are doing great. So I will get the details out to you. I know we're already into March, and then we'll actually sign up in April. And that overwintering reserve queens is part of raising queens. When you get queens, what are you going to do with them? If you can't put them into a hive right away, how are you going to bank them or overwinter them so you'll have them next spring? If you need classes, that's ongoing. The next beginner starts Monday. It's not too late to sign up, although your print manual might get to you after class starts. Apprentice is starting later than that. Journeyman will do the next. We just finished Journeyman, and people are finishing up their test scores on that. We'll start again with Journeyman in September. We've only done 1 Journeyman per year in the past, but this year we really need some of you to be ready for the Master Beekeeper course that WSU is developing in coordination with WASBA, the Washington State Beekeepers Association. For those of you in beginner right now, your instructor is Gina Cuff, just so you know. And I'm Eli Oakletree, which I really didn't say, did I? Oh, one reason why we don't have a really formal presentation is I got through the financials. the first 2 years, we are a 4-year-old company, organization, 501c3. The first 2 years, we lost money. We're finally in the black. I'm so happy with this. We have a few more expenses that are still going to come in, but 2022, we are doing well. And one thing I did want to point out is a large portion of what we get goes directly to the state association for the manuals and the certificates, straight out. And then there's the website provider, and domain provider. Wix, they get so much. Zoom, they get so much. The postal service, when we mail out print manuals, it costs a fair amount. It's not $4 yet, but it's getting close. Oh, and insurance. There's something funny about this. Insurance should be in the 2022 category. I'll have to figure that out. I wonder if I switched. I think I just tacked it on at the last minute, just trying to get it in here. And it actually goes up there in 2022. Yeah. We just bought liability insurance for our hive sites in case someone gets hurt while they're engaging in a hive site. But the really neat news, we're in the black, which is good. And certificate-wise, 4 years ago, when we started in 2019, we did a half dozen beginner certificates. And the next year we did a little bit more, and then we did some more. And now we've really kind of hit our stride. And 2022, we helped people get 144 certificates. There were people who took classes who didn't finish and get a certificate. Sometimes because they take beginner from one place and they take beginner from another place. See if they get more information. Not a bad strategy. And one journeyman, that was Michael Duncan, was actually through us. Although he did most of his work at his home club, I helped finish with the write-up and the application at the end, which I do. If you take the academic class with me and we can work it out, then I can help you get the final application in for the certificate. Okay, we've just started in 2023, so we've only finished 19 certificates so far. And 4 people's certificates just got mailed, and I need to send them an email telling them the certificates are in the mail. 4 that were late didn't make that original first batch of requests. WASBA issues a certificate. We teach the class, we buy the manual, we pay for the certificate, but it is a Washington State Beekeepers Association certificate. So we're working on a lot. We're working on the queen raising. That hasn't started yet. WASBA is working on improving mentoring. And last night we had a meeting. I'm on a committee for WASBA's Master Beekeeper program, but mentoring came up as an important part of anything you learn. You've got to pass it on. That's really the goal. And how do you do that? And what kind of support do people need to do that? So they're writing that up right now, and they're going to send something out to the clubs probably this year. And we were talking about maybe even getting a patch or something, or some kind of recognition for it. It would be nice. Some people mentor and mentor and mentor, and some mentor a few, the people they know. And there's all different levels of mentoring. And we want to recognize that somehow. The Master Beekeeper class, we've never really had a class inside Washington State, and that is in development right now. So the 4 tiers, for anybody who doesn't know, go beginner, apprentice, journeyman, and master. And there is a craftsman, but the craftsman, somebody finally explained to me, is for people who cannot earn a master. And one of the ways they can't earn a master is they are in an institution. And so WASBA works with the correctional facilities to make sure people can do that while they're in, if they're in one of the, I don't know, facilities, sort of minimum security or something, and they can keep bees on the property and have something to do while they're there and learn a job skill. Hey, it's always impressive when you go in to apply for a job, which has nothing to do with beekeeping, and they ask you what you do in your spare time. You say, well, I keep bees. And that always gets people's attention. And then I'm working on the website. So the calendar I said was there, the past newsletters, there's the link to that. There's some resources and links, but we're working on that, and a connection to the broodminder devices in our hives. that at the hive sites. That would really be neat to get going. We have a lot of resources. One of the announcements is I want you to realize how much we have available. In the newsletter, I sent out the Nuke installation protocol, and I think just said that we have the Nuke package supplier list on the website. You can click on it. 9 pages, as I said. Some people didn't understand that it was a very long. As far as I know, it is the most detailed Nuke package supplier list in the state. All of you have taken a class. There's a new digital manual for every one of the 3 levels that's available now. People who just took a class, I will go ahead and send you the 2023 version. And the people who are starting beginner are getting the 2023 version, but everyone else, I think, got the 2022. Happy to send it to you digitally. It shouldn't be really different. Even the Journeyman, there's a little bit of updating on Journeyman. And I'll send that out too to everybody that I can think of. If I don't get to you in the next week, email me and ask for the new 2023 version of the manual. Progress forms. If anybody needs their progress form, and if you don't know what it is, that's fine. But if you go to take a class after beginner at some other club, sometimes they say, where's your progress form? And if they do, let me know. I've got Min Cow is working on it, and I've got another volunteer that I think will work on it too, on catching up with the paperwork, which did get behind this last year. There are so many opportunities to do service. And for those of you who are looking at maybe Journeyman after you've earned your apprentice certificate, and technically you're supposed to have your apprentice certificate before you start the service for Journeyman, which you can find on the WASBA website, or I can send it to you. The WASBA website being wasba.org. There's lots of opportunities for Earth Day. There's the hive sites. Ron could probably use some help out there. I can always use help. If we have extra Journeymen, we can open up more hives at the same time often. Answer the questions better. There's something called Bee Club of the Year, and there's a large and a small. We might get involved in the Bee Club of the Year. I was trying to talk Becky into handling it. I don't know if she came on. I can't see everyone who came on. Then the WASBA is asking for speakers, people who would be willing to speak to a bee club. Not necessarily super formal, can be like I'm doing. And sometimes we have great talent out there, somebody who can speak on the plants of all kinds and how bees use them. Or someone could talk about how to build hives. Or I talk on beekeeping history. I'm going to talk tomorrow night on the different ways to make splits, some of which are not really popular right nowadays because so much of the United States is not in the far northern cool maritime climate zone that we are in. And there are some ways to make splits that would work better if we did them the way people do them in the United Kingdom, which is our same latitude as we are, or British Columbia, it's a little north of us, and actually in other parts, northern parts of the United States, and then Canada. There's some ways to do it. I'm going to talk on that, and then a little bit tonight on the temperature. We're always controlled by temperature. Does anyone else get disheartened by the fact that you're watching YouTube and in Georgia and Alabama, they're making 2-frame splits at this time of the year. They got nectar flow and we're just praying our bees make it through the winter. If you're interested in that, and I can forward the email from this person who is the coordinator for the speakers list, Houston Osborne. And I can forward the email. If you email me, I'll be happy to do that. Looking for people on the list. The speakers list is also, you can see who's already on there on the old list at wasba.org. If you're looking, there is a list, probably under resources. And we have openings on our board of trustees inside the club. A lot of people are already helping out. Now, this seems a little weird, the way that we organize our board. There are 2 ways that a 501c3 can organize. And we may change sometime in the future, but at this point, we opted for a non-elected board. But if you want to do something, you let me know, you volunteer for it, and I can put you on the board. It's an appointed board. So you don't run for election. And like Becky says, outreach chair, and I'll find you a title if you need a title. Outreach chair, she did the t-shirts, the scarecrows, and I forget how many other things, and is volunteering again this year for a lot of things that are outreach to the public. Ron, I mentioned Ron to people that got in here early. He's the Granite Falls Hiveside Manager. Jessica's a Sultan Hiveside Manager. Pat's probably not on here tonight. Maybe. Pat Waymeyer she works on the membership list. Joe Dunsire, he's done some video editing. He did the 5-minute video that you'll find on our YouTube channel. So if you want to find our YouTube channel, you go to YouTube, and it was a free channel. We don't pay for it. We didn't get a choice about our name. If you want to find us, you type in SnoKing Beekeepers Association, the whole thing. That's actually the name of our channel, last I knew. So if you type that in with no spaces, you will find us on YouTube. And then once you find us, usually your computer remembers, right? Fair. We have a wonderful couple, Walt and Anna, who had a wonderful time at the fair last year. And then they are volunteering to do it again. Get in touch with them if you've got fair ideas. They especially want to do something for kids. And they did that last year. Spin the wheel type thing at our fair booth. The fair that we are working at is the Evergreen State Fair, the Monroe Fair, third weekend of August. Our social chair was all set, and then something happened, and we are going to get together occasionally at a church, which is right on the border of Lake Stevens and Snohomish. And as soon as that church has that space available for us, probably in May, then we'll get in touch again. We were all set to start. She's got the supplies. We were going to paint hive boxes, kind of a fun thing to do, decorate hive boxes. And we provide the supplies, and you can either decorate hive boxes for the club or bring your own and use the paint and paintbrushes and sponges. And then Mincow is working on the progress forms part, which you need for your advancement. If you ever need a progress form, somebody mentions it, call me. We're catching up, and we are behind. We still need somebody to kind of take over coordinating mentoring, a class registrar, somebody who actually takes the class application, sends out the manuals, lets you know that we've got your application and you've paid and such. We don't formally have a secretary or treasurer. That would be good too. And if somebody really wants speakers, I'm not really eager to have speakers, but if we do that, we can do that. If somebody's really interested and wants to coordinate it, I even have the people you would call and who you would talk to, and that speaker list that I mentioned, that's part of where you would start. And we could always use people taking videos of their hives and letting us post it on the YouTube channel that we have. And that's a repeat. Oh, I went backwards, sorry. Forward. And there is a Bee Club of the Year award that I posted on the Facebook page, and you do various things, you earn points, and if you have the most points, you win. Some of it we already do, some of it we don't. It depends on whether the club wants to really get involved in that. You get points for meetings and workshops. If 80% of your people have a WASBA certificate, if you have a club apiary, if you work at your fair and you do honey judging there, if you write articles for the WASBA newsletter, you can also get points for journeyman for writing articles for even a local bee club. Any of your local bee clubs, if they will publish an article by you, it's worth so many points on your journeyman service. There's a lot of links. I should actually put these into the chat when I stop talking. I do stop talking at some point. There's some citizen science opportunities. Some people really would like to do something like join the Bee Informed Partnership Sentinel program. Someone told me it takes at least 4 hives. So if you don't have 4 hives year round, I guess it won't work. But they do a lot of really interesting stuff and give you some feedback on your hives. The Pacific Northwest survey, you just fill out the survey. There's links to that. Again, I put this on Facebook. I can put it in the notes to this meeting also. And they are looking for participation by May 1st. You're talking about what your hives did last year and letting them know how many made it through the winter, how many didn't, what varroa treatments you did, what kind of hive you kept your bees in, things like that. And then they compile it. And let's see, this is the one for the survey. Dewey Karen at Oregon State University, he actually even separated out the Washington data last year. So if you go to pnwhoneybeesurvey.com and find the 2021-2022 survey, you can see what they report of what you put in. Kind of fun just to do, just to know you were part of citizen science. This is the 4-hive one. And part of what's important about it for us in Washington is that Kelly Kulhanek, that's a picture there. I was afraid I got a picture of her with her mouth hanging wide open, sorry, but she's very excited about what she's doing. And she was very active in this before she came to WSU as an assistant professor who is going to work, actually is writing the Master Beekeeper curriculum for the class that we hope to have in a year. So at the end of this, if we want to spend the time, I have some slides from what she's talking about. And she spoke last night. I was in a committee meeting, I missed it, at the NWDBA. The talk she gave there sounds as if it was pretty much the one that I can send you the link. Oh, here it is. I think I put it up here. I think that's what this link right here is. Again, I need to get this to you so that you can get to it. And she just mentioned quickly things like her Sentinel apiary program. And then she went on talking about varroa in the fall. There was one other thing she talked about. It was interesting, and she works with hobbyist beekeepers. That is the outstanding trait that she has. Over at WSU, I've never had the impression they were really interested in hobbyist beekeepers. They work with commercial. They work, instead of helping us really do things practical in our hives, they're worried about things like artificial insemination. Not that that's bad, and maintaining genetic lines of different bees, importing semen for the artificial insemination from Europe. Okay. But it's not really what I see as really helping us hands-on. She comes from a hands-on working with hobbyists, surveying them, considering their concerns and needs background, and has just joined them. So we're up to, I think that's the end of announcements finally. Thank you for sitting through that. And then I thought I'd just kind of start the conversation going on where people are right now with their hives. And it varies a little. Okay, I'm 2 weeks behind everybody because I'm on my windy ridge that I love to complain about. But I really am. I really am a little bit behind other people, and I know it. But I think all of us are still watching to see the entrances are clear, looking at the ground in front, the big die-offs of last fall, if you had them, that's over with. But now it's, can the bees, for me, it's can the number of bees in each hive make it until the weather warms? Can they live off dry sugar and that pollen patty that I managed to get under the inner cover carefully on the warmest of days that we've had, like the ones where you go over 50 and you just very quickly try to feed them. Although I don't even go below the inner cover. I just pour the sugar right there where they come up and get to it. Check the slide out board, see what they're doing, but we're still on dry feed where I am. So one thing I want to know is how many of you have already changed over to syrup? And I was talking to people just on Monday night. They were saying, why don't we try it? Let's go ahead and put a little in and see if they can use it, especially if your insulation's up above. And then you've got insulation above the feed, the liquid feed, and then you've got the telescoping lid. So it's holding some of the hive heat in. I'd love to hear from people who have made the switch over and people who know it's still far away. But we're going from that monitoring, we sit there and bite our nails mode into build-up mode. This is what we're waiting for. And We don't want them to build up too fast. That's always a controversy. I know we probably have every range of opinion on that, because if they build up too fast, they raise a lot of brood and the temperature suddenly drops. And that brood has not emerged yet. The bees that we have left from last fall may not be sufficient numbers to really heat a large amount of brood, keep it warm through chilly nights. Remembering that the brood needs to be kept at 92 to 94 degrees. The queen in the center of the cluster, that was just one bee that they had to keep at 68 to 70. And the bees on the outside of the cluster could go lower in temperature and still do fine. Okay, but now we've got brood. And if we hit that, and especially if we encourage it with syrup, although I don't know if we can stop our hives from brooding up when they want to brood up. Some people believe you can. Some people say, they're just going to do what they're going to do. Then there's some other things that people are doing. Comb replacement is a topic that I would like to hear people's opinions on. Comb replacement.
How does your sensors work?
The brood binder sensors?
Yes.
I haven't had time to even read them. Yeah, I haven't had time. Ty, I think, hasn't seen brood up yet. I'm waiting for Ty to tell us, because he's watching his the best. I've got him in there. They're recording the temperatures. And I spent the last week or two doing, I know they hadn't brooded up as of just a couple of weeks ago, but we're hitting 50 this week. This could be the week. So if I see it, I will put it on Facebook. And I bet everybody else will do the same thing. We've got a few other people who do brood binder, and I'm waiting for them to kind of quickly tell us, yes. Okay, anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, brood binder is this temperature sensor that you slide in. Oh, I got one right here. Here's one kind of crummy looking. And it's got a little watch type battery, a little bigger than a watch, CR 2023, I think, something like that. And what it does is this slides in, and there's a little sensor. And then on your cell phone, you have an app, and it reads the temperature inside and the stored temperatures. This can store, I don't know how many temperatures, hundreds, I think, if you haven't checked it recently. And it tells you where the temperature at that place in the hive you put it. If you get it close enough to your cluster, that's a big if. If you get it close enough, and it will show the temperature pretty well, the cluster, especially if it's right above, almost inside the cluster. And if they're keeping a queen alive, they have to keep her at 68 to 70. So the temperature might not be 68, 70, but it will be above ambient. It'll be above what's outside and the outside air coming into the hive. Now, when it jumps, if it jumps to over 80, and if you got it close enough, it can jump higher than that, 85 or such, then they're starting to brood up. Bees don't expend energy they don't need to. They don't turn the thermostat up because they have to consume the honey. So it's a really good question. And somebody, please, I've been so busy writing bylaws, doing WASBA committee meetings, doing the financial statements and stuff like that, that I'm dying to know. It's on my list of things to do this weekend. I have meetings 4 nights in a row this week, so it hasn't happened, but I really want to know if anybody else sees that jump in temperature. So we're going into building.
I might have missed it in the announcements, but did you talk about registering your hives with the state?
No, I put it on Facebook, but I didn't. April 1st, right? You are supposed to be legal, register your hives. It's a very simple thing to do, except the WSDA, the Washington State Department of Agriculture, requires that you're required by law to register even a single hive. You are supposed to register. And you have to download the form, you print it out, you fill it in, you send it with a check. I'm not joking. Last I heard, it's still a check. You snail mail it in to the address on the check. And I figure it takes them $5 just to pass it, to move this piece of paper through the government. But that's what you do. If you have 5 or fewer hives, then I think it's like $10 if you have 10 or fewer. And then there's a broker fee if you really are buying and selling nukes or putting them on the other people's property, etc. So you look at that. Most of us are just the $5 or $10. Yeah, I'm $10 most of the time now. And you send that in. It's supposed to be used for the expenses of the program, collecting the money, or for bee research. And the advantage of doing it, okay, if you were thinking, it's just another one of those regulations I don't have to obey. There is a limitation of liability statute that says that if you as a beekeeper have done everything according to the ordinances and laws, etc., including filing this form every year, if you've done that and you haven't done anything that's grossly negligent or willful misconduct, then your liability is limited to cases of that. You are not liable for reasonable stings or whatever people get from your bees. And that's good. Yeah.
Hey, Eli, remember the construction people? They ran scared from the state. The state called them about killing my bees with a cement dust.
Okay.
And they wouldn't have done that if I hadn't registered as a bee broker.
Okay.
So it does help with, especially herbicides and stuff when they're spraying. So anyway, I definitely encourage people to spend the $10.
Okay, that's Steve Howard, Neeson Baltham. I'd be happy to tell you about, and I helped write a letter too, just because, hey, what they were doing was really bad for bees. It was ridiculous, and they were breaking a lot of rules. And once it was drawn to their attention that somebody cared, and they weren't going to get away with it, then they had to follow the rules. You should have seen the dust plume coming off that building site, and it was at the blackberry season. The bees had to fly through it. This was an incredible dust plume. They were supposed to be wetting down and they weren't supposed to be driving through with uncovered loads of this dust stuff and dirt, dry dirt, through residential areas anyway. So they were breaking so many laws. It was incredible, and they had to clean up their act. So Steve is pretty proud of himself because he got the government to actually do something. Okay.
It cost them a $60,000 water truck, which they should have had anyway, but they had to buy a water truck in order to water it down.
Yeah, and they needed it anyway if they're doing that kind of earth moving and concrete crushing, and I can't remember. It was horrible. Okay, so we're going into build up mode, and talk to Steve if you want to harass people who aren't following the regulations. Steve Howard. Okay, so we're looking at, can we put on syrup yet? I would love to hear from everybody else. Can you put on syrup yet? The first people, who's the first one? Somebody said you should have a competition like for who spots the first blooming dandelion or something, except that I've seen dandelions blooming under the snow. So I think I'd win that one right there. But comb replacement is something that's really popular nowadays because the wax in your beehive picks up whatever is brought in by foragers or gets into your hive one way or another. It can be the miticides you use, but it can be the pesticides the bees accidentally pick up and bring back to the hive. And maybe some disease organisms could build up in it. So as your comb gets old, people say replace it every 3 to 5 years. So I want to know, are people doing that? And the easiest way to do it is really soon, when the hives ramp up and they just really want to make wax comb. When they do that, some people take out some of the older comb, drop in new foundation on frames, have the bees draw that out, and sometimes even take it out and store it until they need it later in the year, or they need it for another hive or to start a split or something. So I wanted to know how many people are kind of coming up with a plan to do that. Every 3 to 5 years, or do you kind of eyeball it, which I have to admit is sort of what I do. That looks gross and disgusting. I'm not putting it back in my hive, and I swap it out for something newer. Swarm watch. We're not on swarm watch yet. I don't think. First swarm, let me know. Okay, you get that. We should have an award for first person that has a picture of the swarm in the tree. That would be a fun contest. A lot of what's happening now in our hives depends on what happened last fall. In beekeeping, all the seasons run together. The bees that are trying to raise the first brood of the late winter, early spring, those bees are what we call the fat bees, the bees that never foraged, hopefully, back in the fall. They were young. And those bees, their age is very critical. Yes, they can live 5 to 6 months, but if they are well fed and they have developed these fat bodies, and this is a dissection here from a Samuel Ramsey video showing if you dissected and opened up the abdomen of the bee, here's this fatty looking substance that is more than just fat. It contains all kinds of lipids and the fats are lipids, proteins, sugars, and everything. And it affects the whole development of the bee so that when they don't forage, they hold at a certain age. That's important because we need them to act as if they are young bees, develop their hypopharyngeal glands, feed the young bees. We need them to be ready to do that. To get those, we had to have the queen lay 21 days before the brood rearing stopped due to the weather, probably last and lack of resources last fall. But we didn't want it to happen too early because then they'd be much older. So bees that emerged last year was really warm, sunny fall. So our hope would be that we have bees that emerged from their pupal state as an adult in October, right? So that means that in September, hopefully our queen was laying. Then we want that October bee to be really super well fed and not fed on by those horrible varroa mites so that it can last until now and just do a great job of raising out the first brood of the year. That's our plan. And if it isn't working, we may lose our hives just for that. And that's part of the question of why colonies are dying out now. And sometimes we go, there's enough bees. We don't think they starved because there were still enough stores in the hive. Maybe they got wet. Okay, then we understand that. But a lot of times we think it's the mites. I put last spring, but last fall. And the viruses that those mites carry and vector. So for beginners, think of viruses vectored by mites as malaria carried by mosquitoes. But why are they dying out now? And we are busy, unfortunately, doing the autopsying. And we don't want to contribute. So we always caution, I know we older beekeepers are always cautioning you, don't chill the brood. Don't just lift inner covers just to look at them. Always be thinking about that sudden late freeze that could happen. And it's not that the bees can't handle freezes, and they haven't been doing it all winter, but now if they start to brood up and you've messed with them at all, stressed them in any way, the few adults that survive the winter, maybe some that are just starting to emerge out of the first brood, that's a small population in proportion to the brood the hive is trying to raise. The hive is trying to get its population up fast. And there's no significant nectar flow. The pollen, everybody's having fun watching the pollen. But what the bees really need is a nectar flow, and we fake that by giving them 1-to-1 syrup. So all these things could be part of what's going on. And they could be part of how we make decisions. Like, are you going to leave your insulation on? How are you doing on condensation? Do you see any wet bees inside the hive? All these kinds of thoughts. So if people can kind of chime in, especially older people, here's a diagram that I use these diagrams an awful lot in my classes. The one with the blue arrows are, possible drips. And there's a number of things people are doing to strategize. If your hives are too wet now, maybe there's something you need to do. Tilt the hive, get more insulation out of the cover. Let us know if we can help you. I use these a lot too. Bees are supposed to cluster, just so beginners can kind of follow us. They're supposed to cluster tightly around the queen, or if there's brood, if they are raising out the queen's eggs. And that starts happening about now, and we're going into the 50s in my area. So if they haven't brooded up yet, I got to check my brood minder temps. And then if it hasn't happened yet, it should happen this week or so. They've been out flying with a little bit of sunny weather, not always freezing at night. That holds them back, which is good because we don't want the brood to get chilled because there aren't enough adult bees to heat them. And the clusters form. I know this puts it in Celsius. I've got to change this over to Fahrenheit, but at about 57 degrees, an awful lot of the year, we don't get above 57. And at night times, definitely not. So bees are always trying to reform that cluster around the queen and the brood. I think some things are going better. I think the weather this year has been a little bit better than last spring. Thoughts on that? It looks like, I know I keep getting hopeful, but it looks like it might be warming. The bees are getting cleansing. What do you think?
I think it's going to be warm this year.
Oh, I hope so. Last year was absolutely awful. Listen to us all complain, okay? And this year, there's been a little bit of sun and a little bit of the wind dies down. Even if it's not full sun, but it's usually sun that brings the bees out for their cleansing flights because they cannot defecate inside the hive, and they need to do that to avoid the severe consequences from nosema infestations and such. The pollen is there, but they don't forget, just because you see pollen coming in doesn't mean that they have the calories they need. And yes, the pollen's essential for all bees, but especially it provides the protein for the brood. And will they brood up slowly? Will they brood up faster? Do we want to encourage them to brood up faster? That is quite a topic. I want to know what people's plans for 2023 are. Are people looking for the apiary increase that was really hard to do last year because the spring was so cool for so long? Anybody looking at nosema treatment? I haven't seen the fecal spotting on the outside of the hive. And if you don't see it on the outside, you're probably okay on the inside. That's bee dysentery or bee diarrhea. And Fumidil B is the one thing that might help. I don't think it helped because I couldn't get my bees to take it in syrup last time. Somebody said, yeah, don't even try to get them to do it, to take it in your syrup, this antibiotic. If you're going to give it to them, you spray it on them, you drench them, you even mix it with powdered sugar and dust them with it, but you don't expect them to ingest it. The comb replacement, is anybody planning that? I think we all every year say, I'm going to do even better varroa control. I'm going to even better. And the Swedish sponge system of slow release of the oxalic acid mixed with the glycerin, there's one interesting twist in that's coming up. Brandon Hopkins of WSU, as of last October, had applied for a emergency use authorization to try out that method inside of Washington State. Anybody heard anything about that? I haven't asked, but I'd like to know if that's coming up, if we're going to see that this year or even this fall. And a lot of people are starting to say maybe we should just insulate our hives year round, at least the top insulation, because temperature seems to rule everything the bees do. Fly or not fly, queen flies or doesn't fly, queen successfully mates or doesn't, drones fly, whether they can raise brood or not, everything. Even wax is easier for them to secrete at certain temperatures. It's really interesting. This is out of the black and white, completely black and white diagram is out of a book I highly recommend. I think most people end up buying it after they keep bees a while, because after your basic beekeeping books, Beekeeping for Dummies, Keeping Bees is the one that I like. Backyard Beekeeper by Kim Flotten. There's some like that. And then there's nothing. And the Beekeeper's Handbook by Samatero and Avatabli. And I put the authors' names down there at the bottom. The Beekeeper's Handbook, it's now in the 5th edition, is sort of the book you end up buying. And I love using their black and white diagrams to visualize things. So last spring was so cold. If you are brand new to beekeeping, it was so cold that some of what we told people to do didn't really work. The packages and the nukes couldn't even use the syrup because it has to be about 55 outside or at daytime high, or 50 and you got the syrup inside the hive. sort of insulated and covered. Even insulation on the top helps. So that made last spring hard. What's going to make this spring hard is that we had the warmest, driest October on weather on record, I think, ever. And I've read in a number of places that's going to lead to a bumper crop of yellow jackets. If you don't, I just checked my traps and I don't have any queens yet, but then I'm a little colder. But other people have reported already catching the yellow jackets in their traps. So I'd put them up. Oh, and if you are a second-year beekeeper, it seems to be very much like raising chickens. The first year you have chickens, it's like the predators don't really find you. The second year you have chickens, every predator there is seems to be circling your chicken coop and waiting for the one time that you didn't close the door at night and put them away. And it seems to be like that with yellow jackets. The first year is the honeymoon period, and the second year they find you. And maybe you didn't bother with the robbing screens. And the robbing screens are actually important then, but I'm also pro robbing screens right now because those yellow jackets, when there was a bumper crop of yellow jackets at the end, because the population kept growing, at the end of that, yellow jackets make all those queens that mate with the drones they made. And then those mated queens find a place to crawl into and wait for the spring. And that means we're going to have more queens this spring, if the experts are right, than usual. If you don't have robbing screens on and those yellow jackets are flying at lower temperatures than bees fly, a lot of people who were really watching last year said, yeah, they noticed that the bees were really starting to pull back, not go out except in the very middle of the day, but the yellow jackets were out early and the yellow jackets were out late because they can fly at about 10 degrees lower temperature than the bees. So robbing screens are one of your protections. If your bees are still in cluster, they pulled back away from that guarding the entrance. Keeping the entrances down in size helps, but robbing screens may be really critical. And as I said, if you're only a second-year beekeeper, you may not have had this problem yet. It comes and goes. It seems to be somewhat cyclical. This also, you have the other colonies around you, other bee colonies. The strongest colonies, and when we say strongest beekeeper, we mean the largest, wakes up first. It wakes up and goes and checks all the entrances of the weaker colonies. If they're not guarding it, the stronger colony is quite capable of deciding to go get a free meal and robbing out the weaker colonies. Some people apparently lose their hives to this. When everything looked pretty good, they get robbed out. And that makes more sense when you realize that there's all kinds of pollen, but there's no nectar. And colonies need their carbs, just like civilizations, just like people do. So these are the kinds of things I worry about. Watching those entrances, don't chill the brood, still protect with like the robbing screens or whatever, keeping that top insulated so that condensation doesn't form up there. The 1-inch tilt, some people do it year round. The tilt is intended to make sure that any water forming at the top of the hive rolls forward and down and out the front. You lift the back of the hive about 1 inch. Some people leave their moisture shims in. That is styrofoam. If you see a wet inner cover, suddenly wet, but your bees seem fine, they're probably brooding up. That's the old signal that I used to watch for. When the inner cover started looking moist, and then I'd increase ventilation a little bit because I was worried about it. But basically that was my signal that the humidity had jumped because there were a lot more young bees in there. And who's made the switch from dry to wet feed? I'm supposed to talk tomorrow night, I'm working on that, on how I explain when it's safe to make splits in Western Washington. And I think a lot of that, I'm trying to figure out how would I say it? How would I say why I would do it or not do it? Well, how many frames do I need in a split? Safest with our crazy weather is to do a full 5-frame split. With that last freeze date, would I do it very early? I try to get past that if I possibly can. One thing that I have never emphasized enough is maybe you don't want to raise your own queen. Last spring, a lot of the queens did not mate well and they failed later, or they didn't mate well and they were drone layers. I personally saw 3 drone layers and explained it to somebody over the phone via cell phone images that they had a drone laying queen. It was more common than I've ever heard before. And then temperature just absolutely controls us. People are talking about they're going to do that varroa control earlier, but we're stuck with oxalic acid. You can do at any temperature. The 3 synthetic, I don't like them, varroa treatments. Those are the ones you can do as soon as the bees are kind of moving around inside the hive, even often at less than 50. Between Apivar, Checkmate, and Apistan, I think one of them wants you to be at 50 degrees, but I think the other 2 are pretty tolerant. And the commercial beekeepers just go through and stick those strips in. For the ones I'd rather use, we have to go over 50 degrees pretty much. And I put it in the order the best I could here on this slide. And then we go through the seasons and we can only use what's supposed to work at that temperature. When it's really hot, there's actually some of these that we are supposed to avoid. Formic acid is the most well known, that if it goes over 90 degrees, and some of the formulations will say, like, if it goes over 88, it can be fairly toxic to the bees, actually kill a lot of bees and possibly your queen. Remembering that your queen cannot escape the hive. She has to stay inside. Workers could come outside for a while. And if it affects her too much,
if it gets too hot, it can kill the bees.
the Formic Pro is formic acid, and boy, when you first smell formic acid, which you should have a ventilator on when you use it, but a lot of people don't remember to get the mask on fast enough, and you get a snootful of that, it's bad. It's as bad as like getting straight pneumonia if you've ever worked in industrial kitchens or something. It's really bad. You should have respiratory protection. Well, for the bees, they can handle a certain amount, and you give it to them in the correct dosage at the correct temperature, okay. If it gets too hot, then it all gets released too fast. And that's the problem with a lot of the volatile treatments for varroa mites. Is you can't use them when they're really cold, but you can't use them when they're really hot.
Oh, okay.
That's like a whole section, one session in beginner talking about that. I've got some other slides in here, but how long have I talked? I'm sorry. Yeah, you don't want me talking any longer. I have some more slides. Let me see if there's anything really important. The concept of the cluster, a lot of you have heard about. Comb replacement. Are you doing it? Are you not? This is a slide we can come back to. Do you think it's a waste of time? Are you hoping to dilute out the pesticides? Nosema and AFB and EFB are somewhat carried over. EFB is not spore forming, but the live bacteria lives in the honey and the wax, and apparently it sort of dies back in about a year. Some people just kind of age out for Nosema and EFB. AFB, you should destroy your equipment if you know it's in there, but could still be there on a very low level and you wouldn't know it. The Swedish sponge, Brandon Hopkins, I just want to mention, let me know as soon as you hear if this is going to actually happen in Washington this year. And he did a talk. I get you the link on that. He's one of our professors at WSU. Oh, one thing that's going to happen as soon as everything warms up, every year, people go, what are my bees doing? They're in the manure, the mud piles. They're in totally disgusting pools. They're hanging out where there's rotting wood. They're on the sawdust or chips pile. Well, it's now known that the bees are apparently picking up something, some kind of micronutrients. And this guy, Nick Nager, he is working on getting a food supplement for bees. That's an extract made from fungus, because he says, and a lot of other people say, that bees are actually drinking up this exudate, this stuff that oozes out of fungi. So if you want to look that up, I can help you find it, and you can find it too. And he's working on that right now, getting that approved as a food additive. In everything we do, it's kind of discouraging that we may not know exactly why our hives died or did poorly. But there was this one gal who spoke last October at the WASBA conference. They have an annual conference. And she said that really when everything got done, and you're not sure if it was the pesticide that killed your bees or the mites or everything or what happened, actually pinpointing the culprit may not be as important as just strengthening the colony, doing your best. Because if you can't identify and remove the stressors, your bees are going to be sick anyway and could die. And if it's something like a pesticide, you can't really stop your bees from picking up and bringing back to the hive. All you can do is remove as many stressors as you can and strengthen the colony as much as you can. So that's pretty much, I can talk about Kelly Kulhanek and her work, but I'm thinking maybe I should stop there. I have some interesting, I think she's really neat. Let's see, do I have her? The talk she gave last night at the beginning, I was saying I've got the link to essentially the same talk. SnoKing deliberately does its meetings on the third Wednesday so that we don't interfere with NWDBA's second Tuesday meetings. That way, they are pro speaker quite a bit, and that's great. And then we're a little more discussion oriented. So I'll hold on to these slides, stop the recording, and see what people want to do.